Hi, everybody. This is Marianne from Brock University. I am an ESL instructor, and I am so happy that you could join me for Drop In with Marianne. Today, we are going to continue talking about idioms. We started talking yesterday, and we went over a few idioms, and we'll do a short recap. But first, I want to just talk a little bit about who I am and what I am actually doing here. I teach English as a second language at Brock University, and probably most of you watching this are Brock University students. So you are familiar with our program. I have been teaching English for probably over 25 years. So I've been doing this for a very long time. I have had students from many different countries. I have taught students of all ages and for a long time. I used to live in Korea, and yesterday we were talking about idioms because I've noticed that most of my students, whether from Korea or China or Italy or wherever you come from, idioms are difficult. And they make listening and understanding a little bit difficult because it is cultural speaking. Every culture has their own language. Every culture has their idioms and their phrases that they use to communicate effectively with one another. Well, English also has this kind of language. And so I think it's really important for you guys to be able to practice using idioms because then it makes people understand you better, but also it allows you to understand other people much easier. You will hear idioms and cultural phrases on TV, in movies, on the radio, if you listen to radio or podcasts. It's everywhere. And so I think it's important to go over them. Now, yesterday we did a few, and I'm not going to go into great detail with them, but I will do a bit of a review. We talked about burning bridges. That means doing something to end a relationship, whether it's with a person or a company or a group of people, whatever. Burning bridges means you cannot go back to that relationship. Another one we talked about was raining cats and dogs. Now, when it's raining cats and dogs, we know that means it's raining very hard and not lightly. It's not a mist. It is raining cats and dogs. The other idiom we talked about was, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. Remember, when we use this idiom, we say could. We don't say I will. We don't say I might. We don't say I shouldn't. We say I could eat a horse. So when you're using that idiom, it means you are very, very, very hungry. Now, another food idiom is piece of cake. If something is a piece of cake, it is easy. If somebody says, how was your exam? You would say, it was a piece of cake. That means it was very easy and you had no problems doing that test. Now, I want to talk about the last one we talked about yesterday, and that was cold shoulder. If you give somebody the cold shoulder, that means that you are not very happy with that person and you are kind of ignoring them. You might answer their questions with a yes or a no, but that's it. You don't go into any detail. You don't exaggerate your answer at all. How are you? Fine. What's wrong? Nothing. That's cold shoulder. Now, The shoulder, of course, is not cold. It's warm. It's on your body. But we say cold shoulder. Now, why would we say that? Well, maybe this will help. There is another idiom that talks about the shoulder. And this idiom is offer a shoulder to cry on. Offer a shoulder to cry on. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you offer a shoulder to cry on, that means you are being a good listener. And everybody needs a listener sometimes. So if you offer a shoulder to cry on, that means your friend or somebody needs a shoulder, needs a friend to talk to. And if they are having a problem and you offer a shoulder to cry on, that means you are willing to listen to them as they tell you their problem and what is bothering them. And that is just another example of an idiom using the shoulder. We have cold shoulder and we have a shoulder to cry on. And both of these offer opposite forms of communication. One is not talking, the other is listening and possibly offering some advice if need be. But really, if you offer a shoulder to cry on, then you are offering your friend your ear to listen to them as they tell you their troubles. Now, we wouldn't say offer a shoulder to cry on if it's good news. You don't need to cry on somebody's shoulder for good news. Good news is exciting. It's happy. But if you are crying on somebody's shoulder or you offer your shoulder for somebody to cry on, that's not a happy time. That means your friend has a problem, and that means that you are willing and ready to listen to their problem. And that's what a good friend does. But it doesn't have to be a friend. It can also be a stranger. If you offer your shoulder, that's a very kind gesture, and it doesn't have to be just a friend or a family member. Now, we have done offer, a shoulder to cry on. We have also done cold shoulder. We have another expression called cold feet. Have you heard of this idiom? Well, cold feet means you are getting a little bit nervous or a little bit afraid to do something. If you are getting cold feet, you are ready to change your mind and not do what you planned on doing. For example, if two people are going to get married and one person gets cold feet, that means they don't want to get married anymore. If somebody gets a new job and they are ready to start on Monday, and all of a sudden on Sunday night they get cold feet, they might call and cancel and not take the job. Cold feet just means you're getting nervous. Now, cold is an adjective. Feet is a noun. There's no verb in that phrase. So when you use the expression cold feet, you have to use a verb. And many times we use the verb to be. For example, I am, or he is, or she is getting cold feet. Now you can use that with get or have. Both of those are very common. I have cold feet. I am getting cold feet. Past tense, I got cold feet. Now, it really doesn't have anything to do if your feet are cold or warm. It has nothing to do with your feet. It's just an idiom that we use meaning scared. I'm sure you have heard that idiom before because it is very popular, and you also will hear it a lot in movies, especially if you watch romantic comedies or love stories. If there is a wedding, you will probably hear it there a lot. Now, another expression or idiom that you probably have heard, and it is a good one. It is cost an arm and a leg. Have you heard of that expression before? Now, why would we say that costs an arm and a leg? What would that mean? Well, an arm is pretty valuable. A leg is pretty valuable. So if something costs an arm and a leg, that means it is crazy expensive. Very, very expensive. Now, if you are out shopping and your friend says, "Oh, I think you should get that jacket. It looks beautiful." You might say, "Oh, it's beautiful, but it costs an arm and a leg." And you wouldn't get it unless you had the money. Also, you can use that in past tense. Remember, the verb cost doesn't change. Cost in present tense is the same as cost in past tense. It cost an arm and a leg, so I didn't buy it. Then you can use that expression either talking about the past, or you can talk about it using the simple present right now during a shopping expedition. It costs an arm and a leg. That's a really popular one, and you will hear people say that in movies. You will hear Canadian people saying that maybe on the street if you overhear them speaking. People talk that way all the time. It is pretty common and pretty popular. Now, another idiom that has to do with eyes is very common, and that is a sight for sore eyes. Have you heard this expression before? You are a sight for sore eyes. That means I am so happy to see you. It doesn't mean my eyes are sore. It doesn't mean I hurt. It just means I am so happy to see you. So if I say, "Oh, that new baby of yours is a sight for sore eyes," it means I am so happy to see the baby. Another example that we could use could be when you get a surprise visit from a friend and you say, "Oh, you are a sight for sore eyes." That means I am so happy that you came over and I am so happy to see you. What a great surprise. If something is a sight for sore eyes, it is a very, very good thing, and it is not bad at all. Most of the time, when we see something beautiful, or somebody we love, or somebody that we care about, we will say, "You are a sight for sore eyes," because it also makes that person happy to be able to make you happy. Another idiom, which is also close to the eyes but not quite, this one is keep an eye on. Have you heard that idiom before? Keep an eye on. It doesn't say keep my eyes on, although I have heard that said before, but it's not correct. It's keep an eye on. That means keep watching. Now, is that a positive or a negative? Well, it's not a negative, but it is not a very positive. If we say keep an eye on, it doesn't mean we are watching something because it is so good. We are watching something because it might change. And if it changes, we have to be there to fix it or protect it or whatever the case may be. And for example, if you are cooking, you could say, I need to keep an eye on those eggs. What happens if you don't watch the eggs or keep an eye on? The eggs could burn. How many of you cook? Do a lot of you cook lunch or dinner? Well, when you are cooking, you want to keep an eye on your food because you don't want it to burn. You also can keep an eye on a person. If you have a child, maybe a little child, you want to keep an eye on that child. Why? Because you want to make sure that the child is safe. You want to make sure that you know exactly what is happening with that child all the time. You are not going to turn your back and not watch the child. No, of course not. If you have a little person that you need to take care of, you could say, I need to keep an eye on my son, or I need to keep an eye on my daughter. That is a very important thing and a very important idiom. You will hear that a lot, and it's used for a lot of things. Sometimes you use it in a negative way. I need to keep an eye on that person. They cheat in class. I need to keep an eye on that teenager. They get into trouble. I need to keep an eye on that driver. His car is moving very unsafely. You need to keep an eye on many things that could be potential trouble if they change in any possible way. Now, I don't think you need to keep an eye on something if it's beautiful. For example, if you get some roses or you have a beautiful garden, are you going to say, I need to keep an eye on that? No, because it does not mean to look at or to watch something because you admire it. It means to watch something or keep your eye on something because you are being prepared for a possible change that you will need to fix. And that's what keep an eye on means. You will have to keep an eye on many things. When you're driving a car, keep an eye on all the drivers around you. Because if they are driving in an unsafe way, you are going to want to get out of their way. So keep an eye on the road. When you are driving, you don't want to text. You want to keep an eye on the road, not on your phone. Now, we use body parts for idioms all the time in English. There are so many, and I hope that we can keep talking about them this week because idioms are very popular and it's very cultural. Studying idioms will help you in your classes. It will help you communicate with your professor better. It will help you communicate with people when you are out shopping or in a restaurant. Idioms are cultural language terms that help people understand what you are saying. Now, we talked about the idiom to lend a shoulder to cry on. But there's also an expression called to lend an ear. When you say to lend an ear, that means you are willing to listen. Now, to lend an ear is not the same as a shoulder to cry on. A shoulder to cry on is for someone sad or with a problem. To lend an ear can be for a problem, for someone who's sad, but to lend an ear can also be for a good thing. You can lend an ear and listen for a lot of different situations. Now, that being said, to lend an ear, very often when we are talking about listening, we are talking about listening to people who actually do have some problems. If you lend an ear, you are listening to somebody tell you a story or tell you a situation. It could be good. It could be bad. It could be happy. It could be sad. It's usually for advice. Now, you might want to listen for advice when your friend is talking. Let's say you have a problem and you say to your friend, "Hey, can I talk to you?" And your friend could say, "Sure, I'll lend you an ear." Or, "I need to talk to her. I need to lend her my ear." That means your friend needs to talk to you about something. A shoulder to cry on is not happy because it involves crying, and we only cry when we are sad. Okay, these are some very popular idioms, and if you watch movies, you will definitely hear some of these. Another idiom I want to go over is off the top of my head. Have you heard that idiom before? It is very popular. If somebody says, "I can do that off the top of my head," that means it has no planning. There's no planning. They just make it up as they go. Some of you guys have done that for presentations. If you have to do a presentation in your class and you say, "Oh, I did it off the top of my head," is your mark high or low? Well, if you are a good speaker, you might get a pretty good mark, but chances are you won't get a very good mark because it is very difficult to do something off the top of your head. But it's not impossible. We do a lot of things off the top of our head. Let's say we get asked a question and we might not know the answer. Well, maybe we give an answer off the top of our head. That means we don't do any research. We don't do any planning. We just give an answer off the top of our head. And that is a very common expression. So let's use it in a sentence. My teacher asked me what the answer was, but I didn't know, so I gave an answer off the top of my head. That is how you could use that in a sentence. Another idiom we did today, cold feet. Oh, I wanted to take that job, but at the last minute I got cold feet. So I didn't take the job. Another one, oh, my friend broke up with her boyfriend and she was so sad, so I gave her a shoulder to cry on. On the other way, you could say, my friend was going on a trip, but she was a little bit nervous, so I lent her my ear and helped her work through it. There are so many idioms in the English language. Another one that we have talked about is keep an eye on. Now, again, you can use that future tense, present tense, past tense. I will keep an eye on your cat for you. I kept an eye on my son when he was a baby. Keep an eye on. In present tense, keep an eye on them while they are swimming. They might need your help. Those are 3 examples for keep an eye on. Remember, when you are doing idioms and the idiom has a verb, you have to pay attention to the verb tense in your sentence. When you are saying your sentence, pay attention to if you're talking in the present tense or the past tense or the future, and make sure you change your verb accordingly depending on the tense that you are communicating. If your idiom does not have a verb tense or it does not have a verb, it will have a verb in the sentence. Make sure you use the correct verb tense when you are using your idioms. Otherwise, it's a little bit confusing and it's possible that people will not understand what you're trying to say. I hope you have enjoyed today's idioms. I have a great time talking with you and trying to help you with your English. If you have any questions, you can always text in the comments, and hopefully I will be able to see you guys tomorrow. We are going to continue our idiom talk and practice. And remember, you guys, the best way to learn English is to practice. So practice using your idioms on your homestay families, on your friends, on people outside, on the telephone, wherever you go, whoever you speak to. Use idioms. Use your grammar, because that is the only way that it will stay in here. And then talking off the top of your head will be much easier and you will never be nervous. Nice seeing you guys. Remember, I'm Marianne from Brock University, and it was fun to spend this time with you. See you tomorrow. Bye.